Hello guys, Crypto Sunday after a bit of a hiatus, and we've moved almost nowhere since the last video, sort of 3 weeks ago. It sort of moved up in the last week, but yeah, not too much since the last video. It's been sort of fairly quiet across the board, but yeah, a bit more downside on some of the altcoins, sort of Bitcoin holding up a fair bit better. Don't know what we need to get the altcoin season going, or if there even will be one. Certainly being, well, it's gone up. It was 60%, I think, now 63% Bitcoin, with no changes made for months now, is sort of a big help, rather than some people being, almost entirely altcoins saying that they've missed Bitcoin. So, yeah, we've had reasonable amount of change. Missed a couple of CoinShares reports, so yeah, they were quite good. 1.9 billion the week before last. Looking pretty good, mostly across Bitcoin, but a lot coming from Ethereum. 583 million coming into Ethereum. A little bit coming out of multi-asset, some money going into XRP and SUI, but sort of not huge numbers. Countries are sort of fairly mixed as always. Hong Kong with big outflow, 39 million into Germany, but nothing too much there. And looking at this week's report, which was from last week's inflows, of course. 1.24 billion. Again, almost all in Bitcoin this time, only 120 million into Ethereum, and then single-digit numbers across the board elsewhere. And again, countries, not a huge amount. Another 32 million come out of Hong Kong, so that's 2 weeks in a row. 80, 90 million. And again, inflow into Germany. So, yeah, 2 weeks. It's not a trend, of course. Looking at this week on Ethereum, we saw a full week of inflows for BlackRock and some outflows elsewhere. 60 million come into Fidelity. They had a small outflow and then sort of back in on Thursday and Friday. So that's pretty good. Saw some outflows out of old and new Grayscale, which is a little bit of a surprise, but overall, yeah, about sort of 300 million, so pretty good. And on the Bitcoin side, another very, very strong week. Only one very small outflow out of the old Grayscale, but they got 10 million into the new Grayscale, so offsets that. And everything else positive across the board. Full week of inflows for ARK. Don't normally see that. Bitwise had been a bit shaky. Fidelity have certainly been a little bit shaky. They had a full week of inflows. Not huge numbers. Sort of not huge numbers for BlackRock either, but the others sort of making up a little bit by not outflowing. You had been seeing sort of days like this, 17th of June, 600 million into BlackRock and outflows from everyone else. But yeah, this week has been sort of steadily going in, so that's good. And the treasury companies, of course, is what everyone's talking about at the moment. New companies listing all the time, and sort of old companies, that were seemingly almost dead, sort of 10, 20xing their market cap by turning into Bitcoin strategy companies, which is a lot of people are saying probably the next bubble, as sort of people are, having their average price at 100,000 and more. Wouldn't think that's going to pan out too well in the next bear market, but there you go. I've sort of not highlighted strategy in particular. I've just gone to their feed because there's so many of them, really. It was a small buy from strategy themselves this week, 245 Bitcoin, compared to sort of some of the others. Metaplanet going quite heavy, 1,000. I think they're sort of memeing almost with their numbers. They had 10,000 exactly They bought 1,111, so they're now at 11,111. You had Melius, 275 Bitcoin, so they're a small company. They now hold 595, but their weekly buy was more than strategy. You had sort of smaller companies, the blockchain group, 75, the Smarter Web company, the small British one that have started up, acquired 196.9 Bitcoin. So that's pretty big. They're a tiny company, but taking on a lot of debt. They're sort of one of the largest UK Bitcoin strategy company, I believe now. Very quickly turned into that, I suppose, first mover. There's a lot of, I guess, people that only want to buy UK bonds or, whatever they're issuing. You had one or two others, I think. Metaplanet then this week, again, bought 1,234 Bitcoin, so they now hold 12,345. I think they're, as I say, a little bit memeing with these numbers. Their average is $97,036 now, so a 12,000 Bitcoin holding at 97,000. That could be sort of weak potentially in the next bear market. I don't know how they've structured their debt, whether they're sort of similar to MicroStrategy and nothing coming due. I do think Strategy are pushing the envelope with the dividend stocks, basically. That almost ensures that they are going to be selling some Bitcoin at some point, having to pay these dividends, unless they find some new novel way to pay them without sort of selling the Bitcoin. Financial Times have noted as well that there are a number of UK companies doing exactly the same thing. They note the Smarter Web company as obviously being the largest, but I think they said nine companies have done it on the London market, some of them buying sort of small amounts. Most of the UK listed businesses are small loss-making companies that have tiny trading volumes and are trying to do this to trigger explosive share price growth, although it does, for most of these companies, completely make your existing business irrelevant with how much they're buying. I think sort of everybody, when they were thinking of Bitcoin treasuries, they were wanting companies with large cash balances to start putting 5% into Bitcoin maybe, on the basis of sort of monetary inflation and that cash sort of dribbling away into nothing, sort of melting ice cube, rather than a small sort of £50 million company, loss making, suddenly just borrowing like 20 times their market cap to buy Bitcoin. That just, as I say, makes the existing business completely irrelevant and just turns you into a very small MicroStrategy competitor. But yeah, that's what they're doing. Panther Metals, natural resource business, reported a 2.2 million loss. Announced, I mean, they're not going heavy. They bought a single Bitcoin, executing on a plan earlier this June. So yeah, they're saying their strategy is to, as rapidly as they can, build up their Bitcoin holdings. That sort of indicates they're going to be doing debt. I did like this from the Financial Conduct Authority as well. We treat crypto with caution. It's not because we're technophobic, of course. It's because crypto remains the second highest money laundering threat in the UK's risk register. Very real and growing terrorist financing risk, of course. Not really what Bitcoin is generally used for, or crypto in general, but yeah, they still have to sort of keep throwing that out. A bit of infighting, it looks like it, from the EU and the European Central Bank. The EU obviously issued the MICA, markets in crypto framework legislation for crypto, which was seen as somewhat progressive for Europe, and this was sort of a first draft. You know, a lot of people are pointing out issues with it, but you know, it is essentially the market structure bill that the US are sort of talking about now, and everyone's sort of getting excited about. Europe have somewhat done it already, and yeah, you had the European Central Bank warning about stablecoins, and the EU have said that it's sort of it has risks, but they are manageable under the MiCA framework. So, yeah, talking somewhat positively about crypto. I do wonder if this is sort of a lean towards central bank digital currencies. You've had Christine Lagarde of the ECB sort of leaning towards that. And yeah, the US obviously saying they won't do it. You can never really trust that long term, but that's what they're saying for now. Yeah, they're saying the risks are manageable. So, well, that was quite interesting. Obviously, the stablecoin market practically doesn't exist in the EU, or there's no, you know, euro-based ones of any size. You have sort of 500 million in like USD euro stuff, or you know, ECB, you know, euro-based stable coins. So they might grow, but we'll see. It's been something that time is just sort of creeping up on us. We've had Polymarket still insisting like they're at 50% for a Solana ETF, including staking, to be launched by the end of July. So, you know, 4 weeks to go, 4.5 weeks to go, and still sort of not looking like they're going to do anything. But Eric Balchunas, the Bloomberg, one of the Bloomberg guys, along with James Seifert, is saying that it's very likely, basically. Rex shares, obviously not the first people you think of when you think of these ETFs. They filed an updated prospectus, and yeah, they're saying add it all up, and it appears though all systems go for imminent launch. So not really heard anything quite that strongly from the SEC, but there you go. A lot of people pointing out that BlackRock haven't sort of applied for one, and you know, when we got the Bitcoin ETFs, it was basically you know, everyone filing for them, not really getting anywhere. BlackRock applies for one, and sort of basically a couple of months later, they're approved. So it's sort of seen as potentially, if BlackRock haven't applied, then it's not going to happen. But you know, it could just be that they don't want to get into Solana just yet, and they may come a little bit later, and would leave sort of the other providers to take a bit of that demand if there is demand. And Solana would be sort of somewhat unique as an ETF. If sort of Ethereum issued staking, then it would be, as I understand, about 3 to 4% yield, whereas Solana, admittedly, it causes a high inflation rate in the number of tokens, but you know, it's sort of no different to you know, a fairly new tech stock, but you would get sort of 8, 9, 10% yield sometimes on this staking. So yeah, it's basically like stock-based compensation increases the number of shares in a tech stock. The inflation on Solana sort of increases total supply and increases market cap, but you know, but holders would be getting some of that yield. So yeah, it's, you know, it could be sold as a tech stock with an 8 to 10% yield, which I imagine would be very attractive to some people, rather than just sort of holding Bitcoin and it doing nothing at all. Obviously, it gives you that sort of digital gold narrative, which people seem to be mostly interested in. But yeah, if staking is approved for, you know, Ethereum and Solana, I think that could be really positive for inflows. And this, of course, is the narrative that a lot of other people are talking about for sort of the layer ones, basically, Solana and Ethereum and the like. tokenization. We've obviously got tokenization of some stuff. Sort of noted there was an article here about private credit and US treasuries and debt and that sort of thing being tokenized. There's about 24 billion, it looks like, in total now. But tokenized stocks haven't quite sort of got to grips with exactly how these would work. You know, they're talking about sort of tokenizing a stock, creating a crypto for it, saying quite clearly to the SEC, you know, it is a security. It's just sort of holding the actual stock. I'm not sure whether they would be sort of buying real stock 1-to-1, and then sort of, I don't know what happens at the weekend. Like, you know, the official stock is shut down for the weekend, but the tokenized stock would carry on trading, and then, you know, presumably the you know, if it goes up at the weekend, the actual stock would just gap up on Monday morning. So yeah, it's a little bit strange. I think they need to sort of maybe work out some kinks on how it would work, or, you know, this is a stopgap until the whole world either goes 24/7 or 24/5, whatever they end up doing themselves, or the whole world goes tokenized and we go 24/7 on chain. That would be everyone's dream, of course. And then, you know, the big thing will be what crypto rails are running all this. Is it sort of people's own third party newly built things that don't even exist yet, or sort of closed centralized systems, you know, JP Morgan or someone, or Charles Schwab sort of creating their own blockchain to run tokenized stocks on, or would it be running on Ethereum or Solana or similar? That's, as I say, everyone's sort of potential dream. Bit of an interesting time on the Bitcoin hash rate as well. We've seen sort of some fairly violent up and down moves over sort of the last few weeks. It was sort of fairly calm, sort of in the 8 to 900s, sort of early June, and then sort of coming into late June, we saw a huge drop to sort of 666 down to 630, sort of on Tuesday, and then sort of we were thinking, Christ, that's going to be a huge drop in difficulty, and sort of rocketed right back up to, it's above the exahash numbers now. We're into zeta hash, I think that is. So yeah, I think this is the obviously not the sort of 7-day average that I sometimes look at on the blockchain charts. This is sort of a little bit more real time, so it is up and down, but yeah, still some sort of, you got to say this is more on average more down than it has been sort of the last few weeks, and sort of at the moment again is going down to sort of 800 and probably below the 800s. On the difficulty, this has caused a reasonable drop. You can see this morning, it looks like, was the actual drop down to 100 and just under 117 on the difficulty. It sort of had been rising quite a bit. Sort of takes us back to, you know, between sort of 4th and 5th of April, and was sort of, 119 in sort of early May. So has taken us back quite a bit. If you look at the sort of yearly chart, we were back at, you know, it was 114, and in sort of mid-February we're now at 100 and just under 117. So yeah, it's taken us quite a way back. The sort of future prediction you can't really go by at the moment, because it's sort of only a few hours old. I looked at this sort of half an hour ago, and it was saying like 12 minutes 20 or something, so it was projecting a drop to 91. Now it's already up to 104, so we'll have to see, but it does certainly help costs for the miners, at least for 2 weeks at least. So looking at liquidity chart, my sort of favourite chart, I'm keeping an eye on at the moment, seeing whether Real Vision and Raoul Pal's thesis is going to play out. Global liquidity sort of rising, causing Bitcoin and even other risk assets to rise. If you look at, we've looked at the all-time chart compared to this, and it sort of obviously doesn't follow it tick for tick, but over the long term, it does seem to have a huge effect. And I think a lot of the bears that do talk about 2020 and 2021 being the biggest pump in history do sort of fail to realise, like, if you look back on the daily here, and we sort of zoom out all the way, yes, 2020, 2021 was the biggest pump in history. Let me just get rid of the sort of Bitcoin price a little bit. Ignore the sort of $1 trillion per Bitcoin target there. It's on the left, the liquidity side, but yeah, you sort of had, the liquidity actually topped out in early 2022, but we are considerably up from that. So, yeah, we had the biggest liquidity pump ever, and it sort of dropped down a little bit, but we've sort of recovered all of that and eclipsed it somewhat. So there is justification for sort of Bitcoin and other risk assets to be, quite considerably above the 2021 peak. Certainly the stock markets have reached new all-time highs in the last week, and yeah, crypto is obviously a lot higher than the 2021 peak of sort of 69,000. So yeah, I do think it can sort of still sort of follow this somewhat. If you look, as I say, on the real-time liquidity chart, it does sort of follow it somewhat. A lot of people do prefer to put this on a 12-week lag, and sort of certainly I've been watching the 12-week lag chart on since early 2024, which was basically when the ETFs launched, because I think that is sort of when your institutional demand sort of really kicked in. So you can sort of look, we had the big spike obviously in March, and sort of you can see certainly correlation. If you take it sort of from March, you get a little bit closer. This is sort of, as I say, lagged 12 weeks, so it's sort of when this was spiking and then started coming down. This is actually 12 weeks after it happened, with Bitcoin sort of starting to come down. And when it bottomed, Bitcoin bottoms, looks like at the same time, but this is actually 12 weeks. The liquidity bottomed 12 weeks before Bitcoin bottomed, and then has been going up. You can sort of try and scale these sort of the same if you want as well, and sort of try and give you a better idea. These sort of, you can play around with the y-axis and sort of scale these a little bit closely. I wonder if that is sort of fitting the chart, forcing the chart to fit. You can almost make it fit with anything if you like, and sort of give you targets. But certainly over the last sort of year, that does seem a very, very close correlation, albeit sort of has been a little bit manipulated, and liquidity has been going up all this time. So there is, this is sort of people's theory that we're going to have a very strong summer, and it's not a sell in May and go away, come back in September idea. They think in the next sort of 2 or 3 months could be really, really strong. And yes, it gives you a sort of 185,000 target by September, sort of end of September. But yeah, take that with a pinch of salt maybe. Obviously, I would be minted on the miners if that happens, you would imagine. But yeah, I do think it's something to sort of keep an eye on, because it certainly seems something that drives risk assets, basically stocks, crypto, even gold. So yeah, all good. So in the past week, as I say, things are up quite a bit. I can't do sort of each token price on my app, at least since the last video, because it's 3 weeks away, or 3 weeks behind, and not 1 month behind. It's down on the month, but this week Bitcoin up 2.7%, pretty good. Solana up 9%, but that is all over the place at the moment, sort of struggling on the last sort of month or two. Ethereum up 5.3, Chainlink up nearly 10%. That's pretty good. Gito up 4.7, Helium up 2%, Radium up 10.1, outperformer for the week, although it's struggling sort of on the longer term. Metaplex 1.45% up, and Honey, the only down token, 1.65%. So yeah, the Solana tokens are sort of really struggling at the moment. Sort of need something to kick off again. I think a lot of degen traders are sort of, leveraging up on sort of stocks at the moment. Your Coinbases and I don't know, CoreWeave and that sort of thing. Circle, certainly. Circle sort of has dropped down a little bit to 180, I think, but it was 115, I think, at the last video. Sort of topped out at about 270. I think it went to nearly 300 intraday. So it's come down a bit, but shouldn't, forget the fact that it was sort of 115 a few weeks ago and launched at $31. So yeah, you can see sort of people, instead of buying altcoins, they're just sort of doing leverage CFDs, whatever they can on stocks, and it's sort of seen as easier, basically, more certain than trying to bet on DeFi and decentralized users of Avalanche and Polygon and that sort of thing. So, or certainly meme coins as well. But yeah, interesting times. Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and like and subscribe. See you soon.